Yes, we are.
Here we are. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us in yet another fantastic celebration of National Poetry Month. And it's such a privilege once again to be speaking with Scott Cairns. I don't really think he needs an introduction, but I'll give one anyway, just in case. Very official, librettist, essayist, translator, and author of many poetry collections. Scott Cairns is professor of English and director of the low residency MFA program at Seattle Pacific University. His poems and essays have appeared in Poetry, Image, Paris Review, The Atlantic Monthly, The New Republic, and have been anthologized in multiple editions of Best American Spiritual Writing. He received a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2006 and the Denise Levertov Award in 2014. We're so lucky to have several of your collections, Scott, and thank you so much for reading for us today.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased to be with you celebrating National Poetry Month. And because of that, I will be reading only poems. the If you should hear a Labrador or two barking, let's just take that as just imagine yourself at the beach listening to poems and dogs. So I thought because I know most of you have already had your Easter, we're still in the we're coming up to the end of our Lent, and our Holy Week begins with this coming Sunday is our Palm Sunday. But I still think that maybe that's a good enough overlap to read some of these poems that have to do with Holy Week. Um, I'm I don't know if those of you who know my work know that there was a book where I worked over some what I called midrash, taking my lead from rabbinic genre of midrashim to do some revisiting of difficult or complicated narratives in the scriptures in a kind of revisionary attempt to comment upon them. And I did that with with some New Testament texts as well. And here's one called The More Earnest Prayer of Christ. And this happens in the Garden of Gethsemane, uh, uh, on the night he was betrayed. Um, if you, as I have read that passage in Luke uh, many times, uh, you may not have noticed this weirdness, but of course, the rabbis in their midrashic endeavors were looking for the weirdnesses. And so I don't know how this strikes you, but it struck me at one point very strange that Christ would have been praying in the garden for hours, evidently. But well into that, we read, and being in an agony, he prayed more earnestly. And I guess it was at that point that I was very puzzled by this notion of his having prayed for some while, but maybe not quite so earnestly. And so that was the spring, that was the spark for this, the more earnest prayer of Christ. His last prayer in the garden began, as most of his prayers began, in earnest certainly, but not without distraction, an habitual, what? Distance? Well, yes, a sort of distance, or a mute remove from the genuine distress he witnessed in the endlessly grasping hands of multitudes, and often enough in his own embarrassing circle of intimates. Even now he could see these where they slept, sprawled upon their robes or wrapped among the arching olive trees. Still, something new, unlikely, uncanny was commencing as he spoke. As the divine in him contracted to an ache, a throbbing in the throat, his vision blurred, his voice grew thick and unfamiliar. His prayer, just before it fell to silence, became uniquely earnest. And in that moment, perhaps because it was so new. He saw something, had his first taste of what he would become, first pure taste of the body and the blood. And in keeping with that week, here's a poem called Another Crucifixion. I'm reading out of Slow Pilgrim, by the way. Another Crucifixion. The last of the three to die was the one whose harsh words to the rabbi had availed for the third culprit, the astonishing promise of paradise. The last of the three could no longer turn even his head. His body had stiffened. He did not dare close his eyes again, so he fixed upon the rabbi's face, which had grown so utterly still, opaque, that the dying one observed a vivid mirroring of his own condition there, or so he imagined, confused, struggling to see anything clearly. As that face blurred, he saw beyond to the one whose shins were that moment cracking across the flat of a sword. That man too was clearly dead, and if this day he also swam in bliss, it didn't show. The dying man would examine the dead rabbi one more time if he could, but finally knew the man was lost to his sight. He felt a tug far away at his feet and a blade across his knees. He heard them crack and heard himself cry out, so far away. Dying, he thought that if he could just glimpse the rabbi's ruined face, he might suspect a kingdom even now. And because we cannot end with that, we have the next day. And here's a poem called Into Hell and Out Again. And it's an ekphrastic poem referring to a fairly famous, ubiquitously present resurrection icon. It's the Anastasis. In any Orthodox church, you'll find on one side of the nave or the other toward the front an Anastasis resurrection icon. I think once I start reading the poem, you'll recognize the image. It's what we would have called, I guess, in the Western church, the day of the harrowing of hell, because it is the descent and the retrieval of those who are awaiting resurrection. Into hell and out again. In this Byzantine inflected icon of the resurrection, the murdered Christ is still in hell. The chief issue being that this resurrection is of our aged parents and all their poor relations. We find him, as we might expect, radiant in spotless white, standing straight, but leaning back against the weight of lifting them. Long tradition has him standing upon two crossed boards, the very gates of hell. And he, by standing thus, has undone death by death, we say. And saying, nearly apprehend, this all, the lifting of the dead, the death of death, his stretching here between two realms, looks like real work, necessary, not pleasant, but almost matter-of-factly undertaken. We witness here a little sheepishness, which death has taught both mom and dad. They reach Christ's proffered hands, and everything about their affect speaks centuries of drowning in that abysmal crypt. Are they quite awake? Odd. Motionless as they must be in our tableau outside of time, we almost see their hurry. And isn't that their shame which falls away? They have yet to enter bliss, but they rise up, eager and a little shocked to find their bodies capable of this. And I thought I'd read some of the idiot psalms as well from uh, the book that came out just before this collected poems came out, Idiot Psalm. Idiot Psalm 1. So the poems are brilliantly entitled Idiot Psalm 1, Idiot Psalm 2, Idiot Psalm 3. But I do have little instructions to the musician. They're psalms after all. And so each has a little epigraph instruction. Idiot Psalm 1, a psalm of Isaac accompanied by Jew's harp. O God, beloved, if obliquely so, dimly apprehended in the midst of this, the fraught, obscuring fog of my insufficiently capacious ken, ostensible lover of our kind, while apparently aloof, allow that I might glimpse once more your shadow in the land. Avail for me a second time the sense of dire presence in the pulsing hollow near the heart. Once more, O Lord, from your enormity incline your face to shine upon your servant, shy of immolation, if you will. As I promised, Idiot Psalm 2, a psalm of Isaac accompanied by baying hounds. O shaper of varicolored clay and cellulose, O keeper of same, O subtle tweaker, agent of energies both appalling and unobserved. Do not allow your servant's limbs to stiffen or to ossify unduly. Do not compel your servant to go brittle, neither cramping at the heart nor narrowing his affective sympathies, neither of the flesh nor of the alleged soul. Keep me sufficiently limber that I might continue to enjoy my morning run among the lilies and the rowdy waterfowl, that I might delight in this and every evening's intercourse with the woman you have set beside me. Make me to awaken daily with a willingness to roll out readily, accompanied by grateful smirk, a giddy joy, the idiot's undying expectation, despite the evidence. And I'd like to read this one. It's called Idiot Psalm 3. I wrote it in an English department meeting at the University of Missouri some years ago. And the best thing about laptops is you can appear to be a real attentive meeting attendee, looking like you're really taking notes, when in fact you could be working on a poem. So this is called Idiot Psalm 3, and the instructions are a psalm of Isaac whispered mid the Philistines. Master, both invisible and notoriously slow to act, should you incline to fix your generous attentions for the moment to the narrow scene of this, our appointed tedium, should you, once our kindly secretary has duly noted which of us is feigning presence and which excused, which unexcused, you may be entertained to hear how much we find to say about so little. Among these other mediocrities, your mediocre servant gets a glimpse of how his slow and meager worship might appear from where you endlessly attend our dreariness. Holy One, forgive, forgo, and if you will, fend off from this my heart the sense that I am drowning here amid the motions the discussions, the several questions endlessly recast, our paper ballots. And with that, I'm going to move over to Anaphora and a few poems from that book toward the end. Anaphora, I guess I don't need to explain Anaphora. You can Google it. It's a poetic technique, but it also happens to be the term we use for a particular moment in the liturgy when the elements are sanctified and become infused with holiness. So think of Anaphora as particularities partaking of enormities. How's that? I, as some of you know, I have until past year made a habit of going annually, at least annually, to Mount Athos on pilgrimage to, most often to the monastery of Simonopatra. Though I have friends at other monasteries, so I sometimes visit those. And off and on over the years, I've had occasion to bring a friend along. And on one particular occasion, the reason I'm bringing this poem to you now is because I want you to pursue the poetry of Brett Foster. He has a couple books out, the last of which was published posthumously because Brett passed away in 2015, I think. It doesn't seem that long ago, but I believe that's right. Yeah, on one particular occasion, I was able to go to the Holy Mountain with Brett, and we went for the brief time we had together. We went to the monastery of Antipedi, which is on the other side of the peninsula from my sort of home monastery, which is Simonopatra. But we were there, and I believe it was during a late night, either a vigil or just a very early liturgy, that something like this happened. It's called Premonition on the Holy Mountain, remembering Brett Foster. In Vatopedi's dark Catholicon, the liturgy has just begun, though we three pilgrims have stood propped in our stasili for lo, 3 dark hours already. The psalms, the midnight hours, the matins, all have filled our drowsy heads with Greek as we have drifted in and out of what seems very like a dream. It seems a dance. It seems a slow, a ceaseless prayer. And when I close my eyes, I feel that I am also dancing with a crowd of silent witnesses. It is a taste, one might suppose, of what one finds interred, embraced, asleep, and biding time in peace. Just now, 3 tall, thin monks float into view to set lit tapers to the oil lamps. And we awaken to the call announcing, "Blessed is the kingdom of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." I turn to see my friend. He has fully wakened now, his face aglow, his face aflame, his lovely spirit singing, "Blessed is the name." I'll just read a few more. Interior asides. This has an epigraph. I've explained, maybe some of you have heard me read before will realize that I use the same jokes again and again. But this is kind of true, and I want you to notice that very often poets, being lazy as they are in many cases, will very often steal some language from elsewhere and plunk it right down below between the title and the poem as such. And we call that an epigraph. And it's sort of like stage setting, and it saves a lot of work. So in this case, the epigraph is from my beloved Saint Isaac of Syria. The poem is called Interior Asides. The epigraph: dive into yourself, away from sin, and there you will find the steps by which you can ascend. Here along the limon, laden with anxiety, a downright heavy bag and right unwieldy, the latter-day shores up his wits with a heady smoke met with a good malt whiskey neat. As most things go, it's not so bad. The view avails a sense somewhat akin to vertigo, but that swoon too becomes becoming as one's dim wits acquire a rare density, sinking to the core where they quell the rising pulse. Here, have a sip and have yourself a look around. If you're in luck, the spinning, spare interior proves every bit expansive, inexhaustible as the luminous span beyond. And this is Anaphora on Orcas Island. And the epigraph is just a dedication. It's after Stevens, as in Wallace Stevens, from whom I steal quite a bit. But Anaphora on Orcas Island, after Stevens. To behold the sublime, one must first accede that one is also held, beheld, beholden to. One must first agree. To behold the sublime, one must first forego one's taste for standing clear, for standing far apart. One must see. To behold the sublime, one must first suspend the long-held lie of self-sufficiency, accept the pulse. The sky, held close to all that lay in view, with mist and wood smoke mingling low amid the deep expanse of green, availed a glimpse, if momentary, of what one's hunger might occasion, shy of satisfaction, even so. And I'll finish with this. It's Nepsis. In English, we would say Nepsis. It has to do with that, the watchfulness, I guess that's the best translation, watchfulness. Because as we all know, we may have sins that recur, and just before we recommit habitual sins, we do have an opportunity to say no to it. That's because we're, if we've attained a sort of a level of watchfulness, we can sort of anticipate from what's around us how we might be wooed or drawn into a recurrent sin. Anger is usually mine. Judgment. But watchfulness is that discipline one develops to give us a little heads up when that unfortunate opportunity is coming our way again. And we do have a choice to turn back to the one who heals us. Nepsis. Notice how the piercing winter chill fails quite to enter the heart's bright furnace. Oh, brilliant, bright furnace. Notice how the yammering electorate also fails to obtain against the heart's quiet any ground, any likely purchase, to nudge the weight of long acquired stillness. Oh, pulsing stillness. What heat, what light, what pulse is this? What recourse has the weary pilgrim save to stand before that endless beckoning, to draw his every scattered member into one, to draw and so be drawn? What shall he say? O braided being, include within your deep enormity this, these, every, all. I lied. I'm going to read one last idiot psalm as a kind of benediction. Idiot Psalm 14, a psalm of Isaac sore afraid. It begins with, in Greek, it begins with an epigraph, which is from the beginning, that point in the liturgy when we're asked to come near, draw near, to partake of the Eucharist. Metaphorvou theo, pisteos ke agapis proseltete. With the fear of God, faith and love, draw near. Forgive, O fire, forgive, O light, the patent fraught impurity of we who thus presume to open unclean lips, availing now a portal for your purity. Forgive the chatter of our blithely fearless crowd, awaiting your pure body pretty much the way we stand in any fast food queue, considering our neighbor's faults, puzzling at those odd few who seem to quiver some as they approach your wound. Holy One, allow that as we near the cup, before the coal is set upon our trembling tongues, before we blithely turn and walk again into our many other failures, allow that we might glimpse, might apprehend something of the fear with which we should attend this sacrifice, for which we shall not ever be found worthy, for which I gather we shall never be prepared. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Good. All right. I don't know if this is it, then this is it. Thank you all for listening. I guess we don't have a Q&A when we have these.
We don't really. We have an appreciative crowd, though. And
Oh, okay. Well, I'll take your word for that.
we have an
Anyway,
invitation to everyone to add Scott's beautiful books to your library with a special from Paraclete this month. If you order from the Paraclete website, use the coupon code poetry. And love to help you add all those titles to your shelves because they're sacred and beautiful and devotional and certainly help bring us all closer to the light. So thank you, Scott.
well, yeah, thank you very much. Take care, y'all.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye.